Welcome back to the latest edition of The Bolt. This time I'm joined by our Associate Creative Director, Victoria Vasquez. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So this time around, we're talking about the creative process, and in particular, not only how to get to great creative or sell in great creative, but ultimately how to cultivate buy-in for creative ideas.
Yep.
Before we dive into that, walk us through who you are, what you do here, and kind of your background and how you got into creative generally.
Yeah, for sure. I obviously have always been a creative, just different mediums. So my background is actually in theater and film production, which is like
Cool.
kind of funny because I feel like the theater kid to advertising pipeline is a very real thing in a way, just because, what we do is sell and it's all performance. So I think having that background has been kind of interesting, like now repivoting into this industry. But beyond that, I've had the privilege of working on a lot of big retail group brands, global beverage brands, kind of having, a little bit of experience working on a whole array of different industries, which has been really exciting. And now at Ammunition, it's been incredible to be a part of kind of growing this next era of the agency. And I'm super excited for all the work that we have to come. And obviously we just got done with a small little thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, just a tiny little project,
Yeah.
our big rebrand. So I think that was kind of my first big project here, which has been so fun.
So that's interesting. We just won't hold back. We're just going to dive right
Yeah,
in.
let's do
right?
it.
So that's the big thing that I guess the central point of what we're going to talk about today, right?
For sure.
Is this notion of not only coming up with great creative, but how you sell it in,
100%.
whether that's to leadership, let's say in an agency environment internally, to client decision makers on the other end of the table. So interestingly, you stepped into Ammunition. You've been here how long?
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
And so we launched the agency's rebrand January.
Yep.
And rolled it out within 30 days. So the whole thing was we were going to not only come up with the new position and the value prop for the agency, how we bring it to market, but we're also going to update our everything it touches, right? The only things that I think were sacred were the color orange that we use and the logo itself.
Yep, correct.
Everything else was fair game.
Yep, that was the brief.
That was essentially the whole brief. And by the way, here's the new proposition for the agency. As you stepped into that, not only, because I think it's worth kind of underscoring that part, that not only did we have this huge, big, audacious assignment, but you were coming into it as somebody very new to an organization.
100%. Yep.
I don't know if you and I had ever really worked on a project directly together.
Yeah.
So there was that whole element of, from my standpoint, trusting a creative, right? In
100%.
terms of trusting the decision making, the taste, the creative process, the recommendations that were coming forward very quickly. I think the first sprint to get to the first ideas was like 72 hours of turnaround. So just like we're gonna just kind of cut through ideas very quickly and make decisions. Because I think maybe taking a step back, one of the things that happens in agency all the time is client work always takes priority.
Of course.
Because of course it does, right?
Right. It's keeping the lights on.
Right. And so for all the clients watching, yes, we get that. That always comes first. But there was a real need to deliver this on time because we had this big event happening in conjunction with the London launch and all the other things we had going on. So to do that, we needed to also kind of feel like we got through the bad ideas, for lack of a better way of saying that
100%.
quickly. Like, what do we like? What do we not like? Because whether we really like it or not, at some level, there is a subjectivity to this stuff. I worked with a guy once who equated it to like, we could go shopping. You could tell me what clothes I should wear, but if I'm not comfortable in them, even if they look good, doesn't mean I'm going to wear them or I'm going to appreciate it, right? And so there is that. Yes, there's good kind of strategy, there's good creative decision making, but there is a layer of subjectivity around.
Always.
Do I like it?
Yeah.
Right. Like you could rationalize why it's the best creative of all time, but if I just don't like it, right. And so maybe an open-ended question, but kind of talk through how you jumped into a new organization. A new kind of decision maker you hadn't worked with before on maybe one of the largest initiatives for the organization it was going to have and turn it around with excellence within 30 days.
Yeah. I mean, the stakes couldn't have
I feel like I should say congratulations, actually. Did I not? Have I not said that already?
No. I mean, no. It was, the stakes had never been higher, obviously. This was kind of the thesis of the turning point for Ammunition, kind of in its new era as we grow globally. And I obviously am still relatively newer to the team. And so for me, it was pretty simple. I was obviously super excited about the brief. And my background also has been in kind of brand design and visual design systems. So I think it was one of those fun, like creative briefs that you're like, all right, let's play. And we have a condensed timeline. And so that is honestly a blessing and a curse, right? Because you can't be precious with anything.
Oh, that's right.
Like you just have to throw ideas at the wall and see what sticks. And so when I was kind of trying to come up with this idea, especially with the new doctrine of growth, you know, that can mean so many different things, that can visually manifest in so many different ways. But then you're also tasked with creating a brand that has to be timeless, right? And actually also has to evolve and grow with the very agency that's evolving and growing. Yep. And so it was challenging, but it was a lot of fun because I think having a little bit of a different perspective, still not being fully immersed in, not that I haven't been immersed in the team, but more so just still being a little bit newer to the brand and to stakeholders and everyone.
Yeah.
I kind of just wanted to have fun, quite simply, you know, and I think it was definitely, there was a lot of thought that kind of went into how can we create this brand system, again, that feels timeless, but also captures the essence of ammunition, even all of the other former iterations before, right?
Yeah.
But this also needs to feel new and fresh, but still us. And so there was a lot of bad ideas, of course, as it happens. It's a creative process. But when it kind of got time to presenting the ideas, you know, you have that pressure cooker, you're just throwing ideas out. I really wanted to kind of think a lot bigger. And I think when I think about telling stories or, you know, just crafting any presentation or deck idea, it's all about how big can we get the story to be, to cast that vision, to excite the clients, stakeholders, whomever is going to be in the room. You know, that's something that I've learned, at least like in my experience. When you're talking to a lot of stakeholders, we all know they've been in meetings all day long, like all day long.
Yep.
And so when you are stepping into that room, you have not even 30 seconds to get attention. And I think that, you know, when you're crafting a story, you really have to ensure that, of course, the campaign ideas, everything needs to be strategically bulletproof and great.
Yep.
But you also really have to make sure that you're selling right away. And so in the case with the rebrand, when I remember presenting, you know, to the team, and there were a lot of opinions, but I tried to really show how big the brand could go. So of course, you know, showing the very kind of low hanging fruit of like, oh, this is maybe what our business cards could look like, or this is, but then also showing headlines of like, hey, we could collaborate, you know, with this sunglass brand and do this really cool stunt where, you know, we create sunglasses to show the new vision of ammunition. I mean, I think a lot of those details and things can kind of help excite and get people on board, because like, to put it simply, if you're not excited about the work, why would you expect your clients to be? I mean, it's that simple. And and I think, you know, to kind of get more into the buy-in of it all, when you're crafting work, especially in this process, you know, it's a pressure cooker. So you're working late nights, you know, you're crafting and crafting, trying to get that idea as beautiful as possible and strategically as sound as possible. But at the end of the day, that's just the very first part, right? Because then you actually have to sell it and tell the story effectively to get that trust and to get that buy-in. And that's something I've seen a lot just in my career, where, you know, you get to a point you're so burnt out. When you're working on a pitch, you know, the whole team has been working on it for weeks. It all starts to look
the same after a while.
Yeah, exactly. Your eyes go cross-eyed and maybe morale is low, but you know you've worked so hard on it that it would be doing a disservice to the work and to yourself if you also didn't sell it the same way with all of that hard work and can be able to speak to it. So I think that is just as, if not important, more important, because that's part of just getting the ideas to life and like actually getting them to be out in the world.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that was definitely a big thing of it. And of course, we had a lot of ideas. I think there was one that everyone seemed to naturally gravitate towards. And we pressure tested it. We still are. I mean, still to this day, my hope was to create an identity that felt restrained enough that it could give us the flexibility to move forward as the agency continues to grow, so that we didn't feel so locked in, or we weren't looking at something that was super trendy, and, you know, we could have the space to grow just like we are as an organization.
I think you so that word trendy, I think, is an interesting one around creative generally, right? I think runs this risk of like, because you can see it, right? Like the trends do come and go. Things that are kind of hot today aren't hot tomorrow anymore.
100%.
How do you think about that when you're making creative decisions to make a brand feel relevant today without feeling like that relevancy is being borrowed from
100%.
trends that are, oh, I'm seeing this everywhere, so yes, now I'm comfortable with it. But then, 6 months from now when that trend moves on, suddenly my brand feels very
outdated. Yeah. I mean, and also everything I think feels homogenous. Like when you look out at brands and rebrands, rebrand refreshes, I think I see a lot of the same, art direction and styling, because it is all coming from, I think, at least in my opinion, as we're kind of shifting with the state of the world and things, brands are becoming inherently a little bit safer or more risk averse.
Sure.
And so, work is starting to really feel like it's not coming from a singular point of view, or it actually is coming from the same point of view. It's not coming from a distinct point of view. But when thinking about crafting, I think a visual identity system that, again, has to be timeless, and it has to also feel inspirational in a sense, where you can see that there's fluidity, like you can see that it can extrapolate along with the agency. Truthfully, I don't like to look at any trends or inspiration. If anything, I always kind of look backwards when I'm doing a lot of research with design or just advertising campaigns. I think something I've learned working on past clients is sometimes the most effective and the most beautiful work is always the simplest execution, right? It's really trying to distill an idea, a thought. In our instance, it was growth no matter what. Like, how do we manifest that spirit and that energy? And it doesn't necessarily have to be this huge, complex design system with a very complex illustration system. I think that there are ways that we can find just a really nice, I don't want to say minimal, but facets of the brand that can just feel flexible and feel like they can kind of keep going, but they're inherently simple. And simple is not a bad word, right? I think when people hear simple, maybe in advertising or in design specifically, they think boring. But simple means thoughtful, right? I think simple can mean thoughtful.
Well, I think, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just kind of building on that thought, I think an interesting thing, at least through the lens of our work, right? And
right.
I'm sure there's parallels we could kind of pull apart and kind of make relevant to folks who aren't advertising as well. But, I think for an agency, we have an identity, but half the time, probably more than that, when we're presenting stuff that really leverages that, it's on behalf of our clients, right? So like we're presenting a new website interface or a new brand for them, right? And we're putting it in an ammunition deck. And it's almost like the brand for us matters so much and also needs to be completely invisible somehow, all in the same presentation.
Exactly. To let the client work and our work speak for itself. Because that should really be the thesis of our identity. And I think we created one that allowed us to do that, right? I mean, obviously we kind of kept our signature orange and really trying to build brand equity with that color, just because like that's us, that's who we are. But I agree completely. I think like when thinking about agency branding just as a whole, I think we've all seen across the landscape some recent big, holdco agency rebrands that have just been very over the top, very complex, very like, but to your point, the work is not at the forefront. It's not really like the nucleus of what really it should be, because at the end of the day, people are coming to the site to see what you do and what you're capable of. I mean, I think for a while, trendy brand design definitely was a calling card, and I think it got a lot of people excited, but that's not designing for longevity. So
in this notion of how you get buy-in and how we think about all of that, talk a little bit about your experience and let's use our process as a good example, but obviously you could draw on any in your background. But how do you think about, okay, I've worked the all-nighters, I've put the time in, like I'm very excited about this, if not maybe a little bit. It's so funny, right? It's like by the time it's done and you're burned out, now it's the time to go sell it.
Right, exactly. When you're
do
like
the dance now, right?
Yeah.
How do you think about that? Like when you're at that 11th hour and it's kind of your pencil's down, it's time to present. How do you think about those moments of kind of creating that buy-in when you're in the room, you're giving that presentation? And it's always been so funny in my career. I've always felt like when you get to that moment, it's like I'm over it. Like I used to joke with people all the time that like by the time it was sold, like I don't want to see it again.
Right,
like
no,
I'm just over
100%,
it. Yeah,
100%.
But that's that moment where you've almost got to be the most excited by it.
That is your moment. I mean, you have one shot, one opportunity. I mean, Eminem said it. I mean, but it's true.
I was curious if you were going to give him credit, or if you were just going to take that.
If
as
I was
your
just
own.
going to take it as my own, no.
Yeah. I was good either way. Yeah.
but no, it's so true, and it is. I mean, again, I know we work in an industry where we're not saving lives, but it can be really grueling. And I think, like you said, when you get to that point, okay, we have the client presentation, we're going into that room, everyone's defeated. But I always have to remind myself and just kind of understanding, again, the work is so good. We would be doing such a disservice to ourselves and our work if we did not effectively tell this story and do it to the best of our ability. And a lot of that comes from even beyond just the creative idea. It is all about crafting the story in a way that is digestible and easy for our clients to sell upstream. I think that's the key, and something I've learned. Like it's one thing, again, to have a campaign idea. You can have the most talented creatives working on it, you know, beautiful imagery and comps, all of it. But if you aren't building in an ecosystem and a tactical plan and a defense of the work that makes the work undeniable, that clients cannot say no, then we haven't done our jobs. So being in the room is one thing. I think, again, obviously with my background in theater, it is something that I found really helped, because you are able to be an effective storyteller. And that's like, I think, something I would say to any young creative coming up. Like, truthfully, it's not something that is necessarily taught all the time.
The storytelling part, or the
storytelling part. I think how to craft a beautiful deck, and also how to speak to the work in a way that feels passionate. It feels like you have conviction behind it. Because again, if you're not excited about it in the room, then why are your clients, whose time that they've given you, you know, why are they going to be just as excited?
No, I think that's so interesting, and the parallel to your background on the theater side. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit, because I think the thing I always felt early in my career, kind of coming out of school, is it's like you go to school and you learn how to do the things. Yeah. But I felt, at least my experience is always the why behind why you do those things isn't really taught.
Exactly.
She's like, oh, I'd learned how to make a website today. But like I think what early in my career is, we just make websites. And like there was a moment I remember early on where it just kind of clicked for me. Like this is solving some material business problem, and somebody arrived at the conclusion that this was the solution to that. And so whether it's a website or a media campaign, or it's a new ad campaign, or a new brand system, right? Like they all theoretically are being arrived at as the solution to some sort of business problem. And so I have felt like the best way to sell work at some level is to, number one, make sure you understand what that business problem is that it's solving for.
Hopefully.
It sounds so obvious, but right? Like I feel like so often, right? Like that part gets overlooked.
100%.
And then number two, ensuring that when you're presenting that you're ensuring that you're saying this is the best solution to that problem, and here's why. Because to your point, it does have to go outside of the room. Even if you give the best presentation of your life across the table from the best client in the entire world, there's still a moment where they're having to now go and sell it on their own.
100%. And on that point, you know, when we think about it, brands aren't making the decisions. It's people. It's that client is having to then sell it to their CFO, you know?
And at some level have ownership for it, right?
Like they have to defend the work in a room that you're not in.
That's right.
And so I think when we're back to the storytelling of it all, and, you know, when I think of that, like, again, through the theater lens, it really is ensuring that you're not only just creating the work, and us as an agency, like it's our responsibility to create undeniable work, but then to also create the defense that then they can take and then sell upstream. So I think, and that's easier said than done, right? But like, I think a couple of tactical things I know that we always work through, at least here at Ammunition, is trying to think through, I don't want to say those risks, but when we're trying to maybe push the client, you know, push the boundary a little bit into more emotionally resonant work, it's hard to quantify emotions, right? It's a lot easier to have, you know, a product spec-driven brief that like shows metrics, shows value, you know, there's evidence there that you can easily see and sell to a CFO.
That's right.
But when you're trying to sell something that's more emotionally based, it's a lot harder to kind of see that end game. And so we really have to ensure confidence. And by doing that, we have to show evidence. So it's not just enough to sell a beautiful poetic idea. We also have to show how we've already thought through maybe some of those pushback questions of, oh, we've seen this before, it didn't work. Well, we're providing case studies of other work that has actually performed that's similar, you know, and that can show you that it did move the needle.
Yep.
And also just creating like a very short elevator pitch of like, this is the idea and this is what it'll do for your business, or this is what it will do for, you know, the brand platform, the campaign, the activation, whatever it is.
Yep.
I think that that's the most important, is just being able to kind of have that messaging, because truthfully, we all know a lot of the ideas die internally. I mean, you can, and I've had this from experience. I mean, you can have an incredible campaign idea and it's perfectly on strategy and like it's just beautiful and everyone in the room is like crying and they're like, oh, this is amazing. But then it gets out of the room and it goes more upstream. And then you're, you know, talking to an SVP who wasn't in the room, has no context, has no idea what's going on.
Flew in from one meeting before going to the next one, quickly has an opinion.
Has 10 minutes, is like trying to get the PDF on the phone.
Or my favorite is when they've been in the car and they're just like, real quick, let me just, can you zoom in on that?
Yeah, exactly.
3 weeks of my life goes into this 30-second decision you made on your phone.
Exactly. And so it is so much more important now, especially in the landscape that we're in and that we're seeing, that we have to make sure we're equipping our clients to be able to speak and defend the work for when we're not there.
That's right.
And again, that is creating work that's undeniable. And I think that we're in the business of hopefully making work that's undeniable. I mean, that's my goal, you know, working here.
100%.
And trying to just create something that, you know, again, can actually create, move the needle in some way, whether it's creating conversation and culture or just something that really will get people talking. So, yeah.
Let me ask you a question about that.
Please.
Okay, so oftentimes when we're presenting creative, it's always, let's walk in the room with 3 ideas, 5 ideas, 2 ideas, whatever it is. There's an arbitrary number. Bring these many ideas. What is your take? What is your stance on that through the lens of, can you have 3 right answers to one problem? Because, and while you think about that, I think the reason I'm asking that question is I always find it interesting when you're presenting. One of the things I've always said is, do not put anything in that room that you're not comfortable with them buying, right? For exactly 100%. The use case you just started walking through is like, you start presenting, suddenly we circulate the deck after the meeting, then there's a meeting we're not in a week later, somebody shows up who wasn't in that first meeting, really likes this other idea, and I've seen it 100 times in my career, and then we get feedback and it's like, oh, we don't want them to buy that one.
Right.
So
exactly.
Don't present it.
Well,
like,
no, and I agree completely. I mean, that is, and unfortunately that, I think that's, you know, when you're young and you're starting off in your first couple of agency jobs, that you don't always have the luxury of that does happen, but I could not agree more. I think that if you never show work to client that you would not be proud of, or that you would not, and I think there's some nuance there, of course, because sometimes, and I have experience more than I'd care to admit, of examples where, you know, we had, again, a beautiful idea, but then it ended up becoming so diluted over that internal stakeholder hierarchy layered cake, you know, that by the end of it, we did have some, I mean, it wasn't really any semblance of what that original idea was. It just kind of like diluted into something completely different. But it was a great learning moment because, you know, you don't want to ever present something that, again, you're not proud of, you're not excited about. And if you just feel like you're doing it to check a box or to play it safe, which is what we're seeing with clients, I think that, you know, and it's real. I mean, we are in a very interesting like economic time where, you know, scopes are drying up and budgets are, you know, getting a lot more constricted. We're also seeing a lot of work moving in-house, or even in this case with the rise of AI, a lot of things are trying to move more maybe towards like an automation kind of model. But I think that the agencies that really rested on that, I feel like, anyway, with my experience, a lot of agencies confuse creativity with production, I guess. So it's like the faster we're able to get a lot of this work out and these ideas out, like we're, you know, we're doing
as though the output is the point.
Exactly. Right? But now that with AI, output is everywhere. Anyone can churn out anything.
Yeah,
so,
output's no longer the question anymore, right? Like
no, not at all.
That's obviously able to be done, right? At grand scale. Doesn't mean you got the right solution to the problem.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
And if anything, it's now making creative work more valuable because it's rarer, truthfully. You know, I think AI is like exposing creativity in a better way because it's showing us like, hey, you can really discern the actual true work that like has humanity behind it. And not to say AI can't be used in that process, but it definitely shouldn't be the foundation of it, obviously.
Yeah, so. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing too. Is just like even just the judgment of what good creative should look like, right? I saw an ad. I won't call out the brand the other day, but it was like on LinkedIn, and a bunch of creatives I follow were blowing it up because clearly somebody had used AI to generate this ad, and skimming in my feed, I never would have paid attention to it. It was just like an ad somebody posted. Right. But when I stopped to pay attention to it, it was like it was a beverage product and all these like hands like cheersing the beverage together. But if you looked closely, it was clearly like the only way that photo could have been shot was like if we were all laying on the ground and like somehow awkwardly holding our hand up. Yeah. But like, and then like we all just decided to sit in a group laying on the ground on this hardwood floor together with our drinks and cheers.
A very real community moment, you know?
Right. Like nobody would do that.
No, I know.
But you know, somebody sat there, to your point, using tools to automate the decision-making process that goes into good creative. I don't want to trip into turning this into a creative AI discussion necessarily, but I think that in that notion, to bring it full circle around the decision-making process, how you actually can sell an idea in the room, how you can ensure that we don't just arrive at this era of all of these outputs over like actually having a real outcome-based point of view. How is this creative idea actually going to help build this brand in a meaningful way? How do we ensure it's tied to those like true business? Like in our case, we had a rebrand that was tied to not only this new proposition, now this this office that's now trying to function transatlantically, where we can appeal to clients on two different continents who maybe have different sensibilities or ways to think, or even just fitting into agency world on both sides of the pond, right? Like, what do agencies look like? How do they talk? How do they conduct themselves? And how do we have a brand that is flexible enough to serve us well in both markets? I would argue in that case, and then I won't say the word AI anymore in this conversation, I think, yes, can AI help us kind of do what we wanted to do at the very beginning, which is like, let's just get through ideas very quickly and say, don't like that, interested in that, that's cool, really love that, don't do any of that. Yeah. I think yes, but I still think you end up back in the same.
No, and I agree. I would never want to encourage using AI for like pure base concepting. I think of course it's helpful with the variance of ideas, especially when you're like in the mood boarding phase or just in the beginning.
Let's just get it out.
Right. Yeah. Let's just get ideas out. And also a lot of research of just seeing other campaigns that maybe deal with similar themes or things like that. I mean, of course that's a lot of time that, and efficiencies that is needed. But no, I agree. I think that it definitely, consumers aren't dumb. I think, on TikTok and other social platforms, yes, that line is getting a lot blurrier between what is real and what is not. But when we think of like traditional advertising and commercials, and like you said, seeing a spot on LinkedIn, you can tell, you can tell there is a lifelessness because it is not human. I mean, there's no emotion behind it because it is not emotionally made. AI is incapable of making anything with a true semblance to humanity or emotion. Yep. So it's super easy. And then again, full circle, that's why that emotionally resonant, bold work, if you will, but just work that's really led with human plus, that is what's winning, and that will continue to win. Because
I heard a great creative once say, he'll be afraid of AI once somebody's broken its heart. Because then he knows it's actually felt something. Yeah. and then you can trust its judgment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One question I have for you while we're discussing creative. How do you think about the role, big, bold, risky, irreverent, whatever the words are people use to describe really pushing the envelope? Yeah. Do you think that there's a strategic reason for that? Do you think there can be? Do you think, how do you think about the role just big, bold, wild creative plays, whether subjectively or strategically in the creative process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for truthfully, let me zoom out. I genuinely think brands in this day and age, they want bold, creative emotional work. I know they might say it, and then of course you end up seeing, paid ads that have nothing to do with heart or soul.
Yep.
But genuinely, I do think that at the end of the day, like, we're all human, especially right now in this landscape. We're looking for unity in some form. So I think that there is a very much, there is a need for that emotional work. And I do think brands want it. I think that there is just a gap right now between being able to actually defend, again, that emotional work all the way to the finish line.
Yep.
And so when thinking about that, it's a lot easier to defend maybe the short-term work or, that safer work that is maybe just very product-driven. There's not really a lot of storytelling there or narrative or a true human insight, that makes people watch something and say, oh, wow, I relate to that. And so I think, again, it really goes back to crafting, I think, a lot of ideas and planning. I mean, one thing I think we do well here is we pressure test a lot of ideas, of course, always before they get to client, but like always also going through those same questions of, well, how is this going to help our metric? How is this going to actually complete any of our, goals for the brief?
Objectively.
Like, objectively. Because it's hard to sell an emotional idea because there's not really evidence as we know it. It becomes
subjective at some level, right?
It's all, I mean, in all, everything we do is subjective, but I think it's important to bake in the evidence for that. So trying to create a story that, of course, is not only poetic and beautiful, but then, again, bringing in the actual tactical reasoning as to how this can move the metric. And I think, that's everything from bringing in testimonies. A lot of things that I like to do with work, especially in the past, working on maybe some of the bigger, direct-to-consumer brands, is looking at different ways that there can be a bigger cultural conversation at play through that emotional work, and kind of trying to cast that vision as to how much impact, truthfully, the brand could make if they take that risk, But it's also baking in that evidence again to support that. And it's hard with you can't really tell your client, okay, just trust us. This is going to be a great idea and it's super brave. Trust us. We really still have to show them a roadmap and show some evidence that can give them the confidence to then move forward with that. Yeah. So I think that that's something we do well here in terms of already, thinking about every worst case scenario. Maybe there's someone in the room that's like, oh, we tried this, it didn't work. Yeah. We've already thought about how it couldn't work, and maybe here's how we'll address it, when we implement. Yeah. So,
but to a point you've brought up now a couple times that's interesting is even in that argument of, well, we've tried this, we've been down this road, like times change, trends change. What's happening economically changes. What's happening, whether we want to admit it or not, politically oftentimes inform decisions brands are or are not willing to make. I mean, I won't get into examples, but I don't think anybody listening has to look much farther than, let's just say, the last 8 years and watch how political trends have changed the way businesses even conduct themselves, right? That's probably a topic for a whole other episode. Maybe maybe we're in a different brand altogether. But it is true, right? And so even just kind of back to this notion of like, how do we think creatively? Those arguments sometimes also just kind of change the calculus because time changes. And so 100%. What we're willing to be comfortable with or consider what even feels timely or relevant become variables that could change. Why do I even buy this idea?
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, and it happens daily. I mean, we literally are in an industry that is changing by the millisecond, and to that point, I mean, just culture changing, how we are digesting content, how we're reacting to content, and so,
or what we see other brands get wrong that then change. I won't name another beverage brand actually who got themselves in a whole lot of trouble a year ago that I think has changed what other brands are willing to do now because they don't want to become the next one that gets canceled for making a move that offends people.
No,
right?
exactly. And I mean, hot take, but I mean, they took a risk in doing what they thought.
I like how we're having a whole conversation about a brand and not using the name.
Yeah, right.
Everyone knows exactly what we're talking about.
Yes. But no, I mean, and I think that that's really valid. I don't know. It's really hard to sell an emotional idea, especially when you have like that one shot in the room. And that's why going back to kind of talking about like the art of the sell or the pitch of it all, it is a lot of performance and conviction that is needed, especially to get those emotional ideas to the finish line. Because again, you can have a really lovely, deck and presentation, and this is sound strategy, and everything is on brand and it's beautiful. But if you're really not able to cast the big enough vision that this truthfully could make an impact for your brand. And I mean, the stakes might not actually be that high, but we have to make it feel that high to the client. So again, I know I keep saying this, but like, this is my mantra all the time, is make work that's undeniable. I mean, it's as simple as that, but it's not as simple as that, but
it's that simple.
But it's
just
that
make
simple.
It undeniable.
Get a can.
Why are you so stressed out? Just make it great.
But I mean, I've had the immense privilege of being in really scary rooms with like very powerful CEOs, where you only have like 10 seconds of their attention. And, I think another part of it too is commitment. So as agency or as an agency partner, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I really think that there's a lot you can do to really fully commit to the performance of it all, but also to the idea. So like, for example, let's say we're pitching a holiday campaign, for a global beverage brand. Let's show up in our holiday sweaters and, fully do the whole buy-in into the brand and kind of I think those details help you be memorable, but they really do show clients like you are committing, like you're kind of selling the idea and selling the dream. But I think that clients really notice that. And again, when you're seeing a lot of AI-driven work now that doesn't really feel like it has a soul, or it doesn't have like a distinct point of view, there are elements of, and just those details that I think can really help, again, differentiate and keep us a little bit closer to that end goal of like bringing the work home.
It's interesting that I hear when you talk about that and like the performance and the theater and all of that, like I think the thing that I find interesting about that I think is worth underscoring is I think on the agency side, it's very easy to forget the fact that like we might be thinking about this brand problem all day, every day for 3 straight weeks before a presentation. But oftentimes our client counterparts are not.
Right.
They have so much else going on.
100%.
They gave it to us to go worry about it, so they didn't have to, right?
Exactly.
And then we show up and we've thought through all the things that aren't going to work, and we've killed 100 ideas before we got to the 3, and we've all pushed each other, and we're all probably exhausted by each other at that point, right? And then we walk and you almost have to put it in overdrive because you need them now to almost feel everything in 60 minutes that we felt in 3 weeks. Right.
Exactly.
And so I think that's an interesting part of just that kind of buy-in process 100%. That I think can be easy to overlook and underappreciate.
No, totally. And it's hard. I don't think it's a skill. I mean, of course, you can learn and take classes on public speaking and how to speak to your work, but it really is, it's like a language. I mean, you just have to immerse yourself in it and have the experience and be able to really talk about your work and talk to it. But I think that's the number one thing I see is like, I've been in a lot of presentations, cross pitches even with other agencies, and the moment they get on the mic, the room the energy just drops, and no one's really, you can already tell we've lost the room, So it's really important, I think, if you can be an incredible storyteller, you will go very far in this industry, because again, it is all about,
it's literally all it is at the end of the day.
It's all that it is. It's all performance. It's all theater. And so, I definitely encourage, and even when I think back to like when I was starting out, even in portfolio school, you're not really taught that, or at least the importance of that. Yep. And it is, I don't want to say it's not something that can be learned. It is something you can, again, take classes on. And I feel very lucky that the background that I've had, I think has really helped in that regard. But it is something that I think we should be taking a lot more time to kind of teach and help guide and mentor younger creatives, because even now in the rise of like everyone being so and now that remote work, I guess, is kind of going away a little bit, but still I think for a while everyone was so isolated, and so that connection and being able to like be in a room together and actually speak effectively, communicate effectively, that art is kind of going away a little bit. And I think that is arguably more important than the work itself.
Okay, I think a lot of people confuse the notion of like a safe idea with maybe being the more responsible idea. You catch the,
Yeah.
How do you think about how you would coach creatives and helping understand the difference between the two so that they could communicate that when they're presenting?
That's a great question. I don't think, the safe idea might seem like the responsible one because it's answering the brief in every checkbox way. And it also probably feels like the lowest hanging fruit. But that is not the work that is actually going to perform in a way that could actually create change and impact for the brand. And also, if I'm for leading a team, creative leadership, I want to ensure that our teams are, of course, we swing the pendulum, right? Like we should be presenting some ideas or more familiar to the client. But that safe word should never be something ever thrown around. We are in the business of, selling dreams and ideas and big ideas. And I don't know. The word safe is a very scary place to be in.
Well, it's interesting because I think even when you just think of like our own behavior, whether it's ours or, anybody and listening, think about how you let's use like social media as an example, right? You don't stop at the stuff that feels like, oh, that's so normal and I've seen 100 of those. You stop at stuff that kind of stands out for a reason. And that doesn't mean it has to be provocative or dangerous to the brand or like risque you have to be right. But like Red Bull is a very good example of a brand that I think does a lot of just like crazy shit, but who they are. You think about them all the time. They show up in whether it's Formula One or they have guys jumping out of airplanes into the ocean. Like all of this stuff are moments for the brand that help kind of them pay off who they want to be seen as in the minds of the people that they want buying their products, right? And I think an underrated component of that, I think about this a lot for our business as we think about like promotion of the agency, is use the Red Bull example. All of that is content for the brand, right? So even just thinking like, I think sometimes you can think of like, oh, well, this activation costs me X amount of dollars. Like, great. Now, how do you wrap that activation as a incubator for content that now you can use to help over the next 6 months inform a social calendar or follow-up content or just good brand assets going forward, right? So I think sometimes we use that word like, well, it's safe and that's a bad thing, or like it has to be crazy in order to be a good idea. Like I worked with a creative once and he was a great creative, but it was almost like unless it made him uncomfortable, he didn't like it. And while there's a time and a place for that, that it made you uncomfortable almost became the louder filter than was it even on brief, right? Like,
exactly.
I get it. We can all say things that make us uncomfortable.
Right.
Doesn't mean it needed to be said. Doesn't mean it was the right thing to say. Right.
Correct.
And so I think it's interesting. We kind of treat these things like they're mutually exclusive. It's safe, so it's responsible, so it's boring. Or it's audacious, so it's good, so it's effective. And I don't believe that it has to be mutually exclusive.
I agree.
One way or the other. I think a safe idea sometimes is just it's a good idea that does the job in the same way. Like
it could be
sometimes
effective.
the crazy idea is a bad idea.
No, agreed.
It's a bad idea. It's not good for the brand. Like
100%.
If I were the CMO of a healthcare company, I probably don't want you coming in with big, wild, crazy, audacious ideas. Like there's a sensibility to the content or the subject matter that the brand is trying to oversee.
100%. Taste goes into all of that,
100%.
but no, that is it for sure. Audacious does not necessarily mean good, and safe does not necessarily mean bad.
Correct.
But I do think that we can think of, again, we always like to provide a range so that we can tiptoe and get to maybe those bolder ideas where we're pushing the brand. And it starts with trust and kind of like cracking that door open just a little bit farther.
So now that we've covered all that ground, I'm going to ask you a bold question.
Oh no, here we go.
Do you think you did that in the role you played on the ammunition brand?
Oh wow. I tried to, yes. I think obviously with any condensed timeline, it was a very collaborative process. My goal and hopefully what was accomplished was creating something that was a little bit restrained so that it could continue to grow and it could continue to evolve because all great brands do. They never stay stagnant. So I don't think it was safe necessarily. It definitely is a departure from where we've been in the past, but intentionally I wanted to try to create a system that felt like it could grow, no pun intended, with us. And I think it landed in the timing could not have been better. It was like a lightning in a bottle, I think, kind of moment for us all.
Was there a moment in the creative process where you thought, wait, no, we've done it? Like you just feel that not only were you getting the buy-in to sell in the idea that you ultimately wanted. Can you think to a moment where you're like, yeah, no, we nailed it. We're there. We're getting there. We've sold the idea or whatever that language is. Like, was there just that moment in time where you're like, yeah, hell yeah?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't think I had that moment, truthfully. Okay. I mean, that's also just me being a creative. I mean, truthfully, you're never happy with the end result. You're always like looking at ways that it can be better. And again, I'm already thinking about what our brand evolves to later into this year and into the next year, because you have to. Yeah, no, but truthfully, I mean, there's things I want to keep refining. I do think, though, I did feel very excited leaving the first presentation that when I pitched to, all of the stakeholders, because again, I was so excited about it, and I wanted to create a brand that I would be proud to be a part of, and so that was really my MO, was just let's have fun and create something that I'd be proud to say I work there.
Yeah. So. Good. And are you? Yeah. Okay, good. So you did it. Okay, we're gonna close out with a hot take. Okay. I didn't prepare you for this, but if you've been watching The Bolt, you should be aware it's coming.
Okay.
I want you to leave us with a creative hot take specific to what people get right or wrong when they're trying to sell in ideas.
Okay, creative hot take. I was not prepared for this, so let's think on the fly. As it results to buy-in. Okay, I think I have one. I would not say that quantity goes over quality. So I think that sometimes when we're in a big pitch and there's a lot of excitement, if it's for a big brand, I think there's some, and at least in my experience, I've had a lot of ECDs where it's more, we want to show them the whole expanse, but in a lot of ways, that actually hurts the work, because it's a lot better to be more intentional, and less is sometimes more. So I don't know, when it comes to buy-in, I think it's better to have a really strong crafted story and idea that makes sense. And if that's one, great. If you can go in and sell the shit out of it and feel confident, then that's the one.